Stephanie, last week, there was a huge a buzz, understandably so, in the wrestling community about AEW Dynamite's viewership number. They drew 502,000 people overall. It was sharply down from 681,000 the week before, which was already one of the lowest viewership numbers in the series, in the history of the series. Since the start of the year, the viewership number, the lowest was 609,000. So very low number. It's considered an outlier for a variety of reasons, but no matter how you slice it, it's a concern. We will find out Thursday if they rebound, but even the rebound isn't really great. So we decided to do a hot take, looking at why we think AEW is by no means a red hot product right now. I mean, there's something, they're still selling out pay-per-views or drawing really well for pay-per-views attendance wise. Wembley numbers are good. But overall, it feels like the support for the company is softer. So we ran a poll on PWTorch.com, almost 700 votes in, and we gave 8 options for why people aren't watching as often. And I'm going to bring that up in a moment. But I first want to throw to you and just get your take on what last week's number said to you, and then broaden it out so we're not just looking at the one outlier, kind of the larger trend, even the previous 2 weeks, which were some of the lowest numbers they've ever drawn.
Yeah, last week's number was pretty shocking. It was very, very bad. But at the same time, it is an outlier. I don't expect it to do the same this week. I do expect it to have a rebound. And there's a lot of excuses. There being a holiday, different lead-in, not the Big Bang Theory. Though I do accept all those excuses, like they're valid. But at the same time, I think like if this product was really, really hot, I think not as many people would have dropped off this week.
Yeah.
If it was like appointment viewing, you're not going to miss it. And I think that's the general thing. Like Dynamite doesn't feel like appointment viewing right now like it used to. A lot of people I know in my own life that used to watch it live don't watch it live anymore because they don't have that feeling where like they have to watch it and they're excited to see it and it feels hot. And although the rating is an outlier number, at the same time there is an overall pattern of the decrease, and either pay-per-views do well, but Dynamite ticket sales aren't doing as good as they used to, and just like the buzz that was there just doesn't seem there anymore. This doesn't feel like a hot product right now.
It doesn't feel like a movement.
Yeah.
It felt like when they debuted Dynamite in DC or when the first pay-per-views were happening,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was like you wanted to be seen there. People would travel to the shows just to say we're part of this kind of anti-Vince McMahon-esque. There's finally big money, big names all coming together with a big network with a wrestling history. There was excitement, and that it was going to change wrestling. And you had Cody Rhodes being an advocate for a show by the wrestlers for the wrestlers, and you had this Kenny Omega, big star in Japan. Cody Rhodes, a legacy, has his family legacy. Got a big push early on in WWE, faltered, but then made a name for himself with that famous, well-manicured hand with the checklist listing all the things he wanted to do outside of WWE. Then you had the Young Bucks representing PWG, the West Coast, the indie scene, tag team wrestling. People put a lot of hopes and dreams on Japan, a WWE cast-off who's proven himself, and these indie standouts. And then you bring in Chris Jericho and Dean Ambrose or Jon Moxley. There's something that isn't there now. And you think about all those names, Cody's gone, Kenny is injured, and I think people think, I rightfully so, maybe his best years are behind him. Jericho into his 50s and not the same person he was, and Moxley's doing more stuff in Japan, and so the novelty is worn off. So the key for AEW now, if you're Tony Khan, is one, does he face this reality that there is a drop in interest that is showing up in the numbers, or is he going to make excuses and stay the course? So just kind of from what you've observed about Tony these last 5 years, what do you think? Is this going to be a moment of introspection and let's bring some new ideas in, let's change some things? Or do you think he looks at the data he wants to, and there's some good data out there too, and he knows what's going on with TV partners, and he goes, let's not shake things up. This isn't great, but this isn't the sky is falling either.
I don't see Tony making any kind of big changes. I think what worries me about Tony and the way he reacts to things is that his plan of action will be to try and like bring in someone else, right? It feels like we're always waiting for something, and right now that might be Ricochet. And when I look at all the stuff that he's done, like a lot of the people that you mentioned there, even like starting with getting Jericho and Moxley and going right up to now how he brought in Okada and Mercedes at the same time, I think like what cards does he have left to play? Like we're 5 years in, and he's had these like huge moments of bringing in like not just Danielson, but also like the guy that no one could get to come back, CM Punk, who we've now lost. So he's played some really huge cards already. And I think that what frustrates me is when they started this angle with the Elite, with the Young Bucks, and where they attacked Tony, I wasn't like fully on board with that. That wasn't really my thing. But my excitement and acceptance of it was like, okay, I think they're trying something here. Like they're trying to do something that will be exciting. Maybe it's a kind of an NWO thing and something like that, Attitude Era-esque. And because it's just, in my opinion, fizzled out into nothing really, with the Bucks just winning the Anarchy in the Arena match, now winning the Blood and Guts match, not actually taking over the company in any way because Christopher Daniels is there. And I just like, okay, I felt like you were taking a big swing, but it hasn't come to anything. And I think a lot of the time the booking just isn't exciting. Like I am excited for Swerve Ospreay, but overall, like this show isn't exciting, and I wish he would try something that like made me feel that made me want to get excited for every week and make more people, these people that decided that they had better things to do last Wednesday, maybe they wouldn't have thought that if we were watching something really hot.
Imagine the people who have only watched Dynamite because Big Bang Theory is on first. Like, I mean, is that how soft your support is at this point? That if I don't get to get my Big Bang Theory fix, or I get thrown off by that, and you know, it was Juneteenth, and I you know, some federal, you know, it was a federal holiday, some things were different in some people's lives, but it felt like a normal Wednesday to me in terms of my routine, and I think for a lot of people. So I put the poll up on the screen, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. I do want to note, before we do the kind of second half of our hot take here, that Stephanie Chase and I are going to be recording the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast right after we do this hot take. And we're going to go in depth on previewing the AEW pay-per-view coming up this Sunday night. We're also going to talk WWE, the Wyatt Six. We're going to talk about Drew and Punk and Seth and everything, the Judgment Day and Liv. So if you are not a podcast subscriber, search Wade Keller right now in your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, any iOS or Android app. Subscribe to that. Search Wade Keller. You'll see the blue logo show pop up. That's our podcast. That's audio only. This show, the show I'm talking about, the long form flagship, will not be on YouTube. The red logo show will pop up. That's our post shows. Those are both on YouTube and our podcast feed, although we have extra stuff on our podcast feed. So I encourage you to subscribe to that also. Okay, so let's look at this poll and dissect this in the next few minutes. I was fascinated by this. We have a bad omen because when I did the screen capture, it's 666 votes.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but it happened to be there for this discussion. It's more than that since I hit the screen capture, but the percentages have been pretty steady. And the number one reason, the question is, if you have stopped watching AEW Dynamite, which of the following reasons most closely matches your reason? We gave 8 options. The top vote getter is the storylines are less appealing. And I didn't really know which of these options would get the most votes, but that tells Tony something, that the people who want to see good wrestling, international dream matches, he's still got them. The people he's losing want better booking, not of matches, but of stories. The number 2 factor in the voting is people are just watching more WWE and NXT, because in the last 5 years, Vince McMahon is gone. WWE has CM Punk. They got Cody Rhodes. The product is just, without question, better than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. And then the tied for third is the product just feels less cool. It's more vibe than anything. People voted for that. And then the other one is too many matches or mismatches with predictable outcomes. So those are the top 4. A very close 5th place vote is less interested overall in featured wrestlers. And that's a problem too, because I think a lot of the support early on for AEW was about Cody and Kenny and Jericho and Moxley, and they're not the centerpiece right now. So Stephanie, what stands out to you as I run down those top 5 reasons and some of the overall response in that poll?
So I was looking at this and I was thinking, like, not to be fatalistic on AEW, but if a similar poll like this had been presented to me at the time when I stopped watching Nitro forever and switched to Raw, what would I have picked? And it would have been probably storylines less appealing and the product feels less cool, and then obviously watching more WWE
Wow.
instead.
Yep.
But,
History's repeating itself. Yep.
yeah, but the feeling less cool and the storylines, like that would have been a big thing. And maybe if there was an option that seeing the same old guys on top over and over again might have been part of it, you know, too much Hogan and everything. But it's interesting to think about it, like in that perspective, like as someone that at one point in their life did just turn off a company and switch to the other company. What made me do that? And yeah, it was definitely that vibe. And AW was lucky to come along at a time when WWE, frankly, just wasn't very good at all. So they
that's
had
part of what sparked the movement. Is
yeah,
frustration with Vince McMahon booking and
absolutely
and John
frustration with
Cena.
that. People like me that had watched WWE for a long time, we were watching New Japan instead and saying like, this is where it's really at. And then they created an American company that could bring some of that over. But WWE is actually good now and Vince McMahon is gone. So that feeling against WWE isn't there. So AEW they don't really have something to rebel against as much as they did when they started. But at the same time, they've kind of moved into not distinguishing themselves properly. But I think the storylines is a big thing. I think I think I said this before when we reviewed Dynamite, that I think that Tony really started off with a great idea of his list of champions, and it got to Hangman, and he told a great story with Hangman that unfortunately ended when he won the belt because he didn't have this great reign. And then he got CM Punk in, and it all kind of became about him. And like, I love Punk, so that was a good thing for me, but he kind of lost the long-term planning and the pattern there.
And he also, because of what happened with CM Punk and the Bucks in particular, but some others involved, people felt forced to take sides. You know, I mean, it went from a harmonious situation to a contentious situation. And I think you had a big part of the AEW audience going, if Punk goes, I go. If the Bucks go, I go. You know, like and that's where Collision came in. I mean, it was sort of like, well, let's just give them a separate show so everybody can be happy. But it wouldn't have made everybody happy even if Punk had stayed. So, and by the way, the addition of Collision was a low vote getter, but I think that's one of the big reasons also for Dynamite's drop. And it's sort of it's the tangible aspect of, if you watch Collision, maybe you're not hungry for Dynamite, so you do something else on a Wednesday night. And then the other thing is the booking is watered down and it's harder to keep track of what's happening. And so I think that's a bit of an intangible that is a contributing factor that I think if people could vote for more than one option would have been on a lot of people's list also.
Yeah, the addition of Collision and Rampage, I don't know that many people that watch Collision and Rampage every week, and that's a really big feeling. And you don't need to watch those two shows. Like, if you can follow AEW by just watching Dynamite, and gosh, not to mention WCW again, but like watching Death of WCW, I think it's episode 2 where Bischoff is like, and now I had 2 shows to book, and it just suddenly hit me when I was watching that Tony Khan has 3. Like, he has 3 TV shows to try and get people to watch, and it's a lot. And if you have 2 shows that are just stacked with all these matches, even if these matches are like really good or dream matches or for the sickos, if they're not giving you anything that brings in the people that are watching Dynamite, your core audience, your biggest audience, they become pointless. Like, they really do. We don't need 2 shows on main television that have matches every week.
So we'll wrap up the 12-minute hot take there. I think we hit on a variety of concerns Tony Khan should have, and maybe a little skepticism on both of our parts that he'll make the changes that need to be made. But I also think if he doesn't make changes, AEW will survive and be okay. But for now, and they do have a lot of good young talent, but the booking could use some improving. And I think one I want to underline the notion. I hear this so much. Miss long matches where you know what the outcome is going to be is a staple of Tony Khan's booking philosophy. And I think if there's one thing that he can wave a magic wand and change pretty easily, he can't bring Kenny Omega back. He can't instantly make the company cool. He's made some choices as far as that goes that he probably has to stick with. But he can start booking more competitive matches where you don't know the outcome and do clean finishes. And I think that's like the instant thing he can do. I think there should be a 6 or 8 point plan over the next year to fix some things and improve some things. But that's the thing he can just start doing next week.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It would help if all the titles worked on guys that pretty much can't lose, like your Okadas and Will Ospreay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, I'll put the graphic up. If you want to go VIP, you can hear a lot more of what we do and also read our 35-year history of wrestling coverage. PWTorch.com/go VIP. If you're listening to us and not looking at the screen, that is the graphic. Stephanie, you and I will be recording the flagship, and we encourage everybody to search Wade Keller in your podcast app and subscribe, and we will talk to you on the other side of this closing thing that we're doing right now, which is nothing. We're just ending the show. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thanks, man.